Hey, Diva family. We are back in podcast flow with another super cool episode for your enjoyment. So, for the past several months, I have been taking part in a microdosing facilitator training, and I just completed the course. Now, when I first heard about this course, I was impressed by the lineup of teachers that had been assembled for it, but I was not thinking about taking it. And then one night in ceremony, I heard the call. So I decided to sign up, and I'm so glad I did. So the field of psychedelics is moving so fast that if you want to stay even barely on top of it, you need to make an effort. And this course made that effort easy. The course was co created by today's guest, Danielle Nova, in partnership with Adam Bramlage. And I was blown away by the depth of what they created. So we'll be talking about that today, as well as the use of psychedelics in addiction recovery and so much more. So let's get going. So, I like to start my podcast by telling you how I know my guests. And so I first met Danielle Nova in 2018. And I went to an event in San Francisco that combined consciousness and psychedelics. And Danielle was behind the San Francisco Psychedelic Society table. So I wandered over to see what that was all about. And now I know all y'all are openly talking about psychedelics today, but that was less common back then. And Danielle made an impression. And as we continue to cross paths over the years, I've come to admire who she is and how she shows up in the world. So let me tell you a little bit about her. Danielle Nova is the co-founder of Flow State and the Microdosing Facilitator training. She's also the founder of Psychedelic Recovery and executive director of the San Francisco Psychedelic Society. She's recognized for her expertise in addiction recovery, microdosing, and guiding spiritual transformation. Danielle has created and delivered educational programs and integration services to over 25,000 individuals worldwide. She has spearheaded international plant medicine retreats in partnership with indigenous leaders from South America. Danielle was instrumental in co-founding Decriminalize Nature Oakland, which passed the first resolution in the United States to deprioritize all entheogenic plants and fungi. Welcome to Psychedelic Divas, Danielle. I'm so pleased to have you here. So let's start at your beginning. I know a bit about your story, and I know that you took a deep, dark 15-year dive into addiction starting in middle school, and that you were eventually able to transform that addiction with the use of psychedelics. And I've also heard you share that you were grateful for your addiction because it brought you to your purpose on this planet. So would you mind sharing a bit about your story with us?
Absolutely, Carla. And I just want to thank you so much for having me here on the podcast and honoring you for the decades of incredible work and experience that you have brought to the world and to humanity and to consciousness and for the medicines. Thank you for
Oh,
all that you are and all that you do.
thank you so much.
I really struggled with addiction for a long time, and it was an attempt to save my own life. And I experienced some traumatic events as a 9-year old, which then led me to running away from myself and searching for love and a soothing blanket and a pacifier. And I discovered that drugs and alcohol were very effective at soothing myself. So I started with alcohol, which led to cannabis, which then led to cocaine and methamphetamine in high school. I became really active in the rave scene and was taking MDMA every weekend and as a 16-year-old, and then experienced some traumatic events, which then led me to having a lot of anxiety and depression and PTSD. And my father's a doctor and my mother's a counselor, and the only tools that they knew were available at that time were to send me to a psychiatrist. And I was put on antidepressants and then anti-anxiety medication and Adderall for focus and sleeping medications. And by the time I was graduated high school, I was on 6 different medications. I then got really addicted to Oxycontin and opiates and heroin, and spent most of my 20s in and out of treatment centers and rehabs. I went to rehab 8 times and kept relapsing and was put on hundreds of psychiatric medications in rehab, up to 20 medications a day just to function. And I was just completely controlled by drugs. Was also addicted to cigarettes and smoked over a pack a day for 12 years, and was heavily addicted to cannabis as well, and was yeah, just kind of a zombie and a shell of a person, and was told I had the disease of addiction and I was going to be an addict for the rest of my life, and that I would have to be on psychiatric medications for the rest of my life. And I really believed that and subscribed to all these doctors and treatment centers, and what they told me was wrong with me. And I remember going to my doctor and asking my doctor for more medication because the meds that I was on weren't being working, and I was suicidally depressed every day. And he just said, drink more coffee or smoke more cigarettes. We've literally prescribed you every medication possible. And at that point, a light bulb went off in my head, and I realized, well, maybe these drugs are my problem. And I had never lived a moment as an adult free of taking handfuls of pills every day just to function. And so I pulled myself off of all these medications over many, many years, and almost died from that process, and almost physically died and almost took my life. And psychedelics helped interrupt this process of severe withdrawal and drug addiction, and transformed my life, transformed my consciousness, and transformed my spirit. So I'm so grateful for my addiction, and I'm so grateful for psychedelics.
I mean, it's obviously such a rare statement to be grateful for your addiction, and I do understand that it's those kinds of lessons that we grow the most from. But I would say most addicts would not be using that sentence, so that's why it's so powerful. You were actually a psychedelic advocate in high school, so, so you were actually proselytizing. So at that point, that was more of a rave situation, and so like what were you, you were not just saying no, you were the opposite. How was that received by your friends?
It was a really hard time. I remember feeling I had a spiritual awakening in high school, and MDMA was a part of that. And I remember taking MDMA and going to raves and just feeling connected with God and divinity and understanding unity consciousness.
Right.
And that was not common around my peers. My peers were not waking up, spiritually. I remember getting really into Plato and the allegory of the cave and looking up all these spiritual philosophies. And I even did a light show in front of the rest of my peers in high school, and was trying to get everyone understanding MDMA. I gave a presentation around dance safe and how to test your substances. And I remember my peers really being scared
Mhm.
of psychedelics, and some of them actually started trying MDMA, but I was quite the anomaly back then, and there was a ton of fear. There was a lot of stigma around what I was doing, and it's just so interesting that it's come full circle now, that I was actually really connected with my soul and my purpose and the connection with the medicines back then. And it's been beautiful to see me come back around and continue to be a psychedelic advocate now. And that's really the roots of my use, was when I was a teenager.
Right, so that it was something that you were comfortable with. And by the way, this podcast does not promote the use of any sort of illegal substances for underage brains. I mean, really, I don't recommend it under 21. Actually, the brain is still developing, and it's probably not a great idea. And I'm not in any way being negative about your experience, but I want to hold that line that I think it is important to step into these medicines because they're so powerful when you're older, when you have more awareness. And so anyway, for you, it was that important imprinting that then allowed you to come back to it later. So I totally get the value of that. When you were in high school, did you? So you said your parents sent you to a psychiatrist, and 20 minutes later you walked out with a prescription. But when you were in high school, did you receive any treatments for your early trauma, or were you just medicated?
Just medicated. I wasn't even conscious of that early trauma until
Hmm.
honestly a few years ago.
Well, you had had some, you said there was another trauma that happened when you were, when you were
Right.
16. So you would have been aware of that, and nobody helped you walk through that situation?
Well, basically, several friends committed suicide in high school, and that
Hmm.
was really difficult for me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's funny, my mom is a grief counselor, and she had really didn't provide any support to me back then. I remember going to therapists and practitioners to support that process, but I don't really feel like I received a lot of deep healing work to be able to help me understand that experience of what it's like to have your peers take their own lives, and they it was very traumatic and it was many of them.
It does sound horrifying. I'm so sorry. You mentioned that when you decided to take yourself off the drugs after all of these years of being, so medicated, eight times in rehab, and you also, I've heard you say that psychiatric medications were 100 times harder to get off of than heroin. I know Jerry Garcia said that it was harder to quit tobacco than heroin. So you had both of those going, your pack a day habit and all of those meds. So as you pulled yourself off, you tell us a little bit about that withdrawal process, because it was brutal. I've never heard anything equal to that, and you actually documented it in little video snippets, which there'll be a link in the show notes. Y'all can watch her addiction recovery videos on YouTube, and I'm highly recommending it because it's a really powerful journey that she's catching, live as she goes through it. So tell us a little about that. Was it an 18-month withdrawal process?
Yeah, exactly. And thank you so much. I just feel like you're so attuned with my process, and that really means a lot to me, Carla. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Uh, it was I had no idea what I was getting into. I had no idea how addictive these prescription drugs are. And even though it's not a classical, addiction in terms of street drugs, I have found medications prescribed by doctors to be much more addictive and difficult to get off of. And I was heavily dependent on about 8 different medications and physically dependent on them. And withdrawing off of them was honestly traumatic. And the doctor helped me slowly wean off of it. But I was the first patient he's ever had to come off of it. And most of these medications are only studied for 6 months at a time, and yet they're prescribed for decades for people. And I'm really not unique in my journey. I'm unique in the fact that I came off of these medications and used psychedelics to heal. And coming off of them at first, I thought I was fine, and then it just slowly started deteriorating to the point where I got a brain injury. I lost all ability to talk, walk, function. I lost my vision for over a year. My whole day was centered around just, where do I find clean water? How do I get the energy to feed myself? I remember driving my car to the gas station and completely forgetting how to fill it up with gas. And I was like, whoa, I don't even know how to use my credit card. And it was just scary, like to slowly watch your brain deteriorate. And I didn't really have support from my family. They didn't understand what was happening to me. And it was just horrifying. And I remember trying to make myself a smoothie, just like a basic thing. And I didn't even know how to do that. That was
Oh,
overwhelming to me. And that was just horrifying, because I think it's one thing if you get a traumatic brain injury and you know what's happening and you understand what's happening, but just to have this experience induced by medications and then have no doctor be able to understand what's happening to you or anyone around you. I was just so isolated in that process and didn't know what was happening to me, and I just got worse and worse and worse. And it continued for months and months and months, and there was just hundreds of withdrawal symptoms and purging and pain all over my body, and it was just awful. I would never wish this upon anyone, and now I'm finding that it's normal. And this is part of psychiatric drug withdrawal, and specifically benzodiazepine withdrawal, especially if you don't come off of it properly. So I I teach about this in the microdosing course, and how I am actually grateful for the withdrawal, because it's the biggest relapse prevention tool. The fact that I went through all of that, it brought me to my knees, it humbled me, and it made me realize that never want to go back on those drugs. It's not even a question, because I was really put through hell coming off of them, and it's medicinal to go through that process.
It is medicinal in the healing sense of that word. Did your families did they support you going off, or was this a fight with your family? Because obviously they're seeing these withdrawals. Are they just saying just go back on the drugs, or what was that dynamic like?
Yeah, my family was not very supportive of me coming off of them. I think they were scared
Sure.
because they were told that they had a daughter that needed to be on them. And my mom didn't talk to me for 6 months when I came off of them. She was really upset at me. They were very hands off with the process. They didn't really know how to help me, and they were quite horrified. So, but it all needed to happen in that way because it really resourced me to become so strong within myself and really believe in myself that I knew that I wasn't meant to be on those medications.
And that is how you show up today with that. You can just see that, you can feel the strong resource within you. So I totally get what must have been needed in order to get to that place. So you're in the video journey that you document, you are starting to feel incrementally better, and then you have a bad, another bad, like you drop back down into, like, healing is not linear, you say. And then you start, you make the decision to start microdosing psilocybin, and there's a dramatic shift. But at what point you say my brain is healing from these mushrooms, but I want to know what led you to microdosing, especially after you'd worked so hard to get off all the other medications.
Mm. I just felt like a spiritual activation in my body when you said that. So I had been starting to work with ayahuasca. A friend brought me into an ayahuasca session, and I was literally about to take my own life during this
Mhm.
withdrawal because I had been 9 months into the withdrawal and things were not getting better. And I'm thinking to myself, well, why did I go through this whole process? Why, if I'm just feeling awful every day? And ayahuasca ended up snapping me out of this very intense withdrawal syndrome, but I was still suffering a lot and doing ayahuasca 1 to 2 times a month and still suffering with debilitating withdrawal syndrome and agoraphobia, inability to go outside and function as a normal human being. And I really don't know. I think someone just gifted me mushrooms, and I just started taking small bites of them. And it wasn't like I was learning about microdosing or knew anything about microdosing as a treatment for addiction, or even this was back when no one was talking about psychedelics as a treatment for addiction. And
Right.
the changes that I was experiencing, I remember after the first mushroom microdose, I could actually go outside and talk to people. And that was, after not leaving my apartment for sometimes weeks at a time, it was just such a game changer. And just basic things that we take for granted as a healthy human being. I felt like the withdrawal syndrome and the tremors started to dissipate, and the pain in my body was improving. I noticed the brain injury symptoms were improving. So it was just a game changer. And I wasn't dosing properly at that time or knew anything about dosing, but just taking small bites of mushrooms was profound in that withdrawal process.
Well, I would say that there's some soul guidance happening here,
Yeah.
because the fact that something made you say take a small bite. Okay, take a microdose, whatever that dosing was, who knows? But because you were already doing ayahuasca, so you weren't afraid of a macro dose. So, I think most people would have been like, okay, all right, well, let me just take, this handful of mushrooms. So whatever that soul guidance was, that, because obviously microdosing is your soul path. This is the place where addiction recovery and microdosing are at least currently the two things that you are really teaching and putting out into the world. So I'm really honoring that inner voice, that wherever that came from, that said, take a small bite.
Yeah, so true. I love that. Absolutely. It was definitely soul guided.
fellow explorers. Thoughtful planning and preparation is the foundation of any successful psychedelic journey. And if something does go wrong, knowing how to navigate that difficult space is essential. That's why I wrote my psychedelic safety guide, including what to do when things go wrong. It's filled with tips and tools for keeping you and your friends as safe as possible. You'll find it at our website, psychedelicdivas.com. Please go get it, read it, and share it. The more we all know, the safer we can keep each other. Thanks.
So you also say that addiction's a family problem, which I totally agree with. And you've been able to use psychedelics as a healing tool. I know that your dad has attended ayahuasca ceremonies with you and he microdoses with you, and you have called that a healing tool for your relationship. But that's not how it started. So can you talk a bit about that journey between the two of you?
Absolutely. I'm so grateful for my father and his openness. And he's always been my advocate. He's always been a supporter no matter what I was into. He's been a supporter. So I do want to say that. And but there's been a learning curve in terms of psychedelics because my family went through a lot with my addiction and really
Yeah.
struggled.
And I'm sure they were really scared as it's like, oh my God, she's just getting off everything. She's just starting to get somewhat better. And now she's going to go down this slippery slope. And I mean, I would have been concerned as a parent. There was, I'm sure so much fear in them around this decision. So like, how did you shift that with your dad?
Exactly, because the 8 years ago, psychedelics were viewed as just another drug and potentially a harmful addictive drug.
Hmm.
And there wasn't any information really circulating around that. So, but I do remember my father drove me to my first ayahuasca ceremony, and then he noticed the dramatic shifts that were happening. And I think one of the biggest ones for me, for my parents, was seeing me take accountability. I really was in a victim mindset of not really taking accountability for my recovery process for a long time, and to see me owning and even admitting I was in denial that I had experienced addiction and didn't want to admit that. And ayahuasca helped me come to terms with my recovery process and really own my role in it. And I think that was really profound for my parents to witness, that sovereignty, that ownership, the reclamation of my power, and to see my slow improvement over time. And so I just would come home and integrate my experiences with my dad sometimes. And he was just really blown away by the insights that I was having and the healing that I was experiencing. So just slowly sent him information and Michael Pollan's book, and always invited him to
Oh,
ceremonies.
Michael Pollan's book, The Gateway Drug.
Exactly, the pollinator of consciousness. And yeah, my parents got divorced in 2020, and that created an opening for my father. And he came and sat in ceremony during COVID, and it was harder for him to let go in that ceremony. I think he was just feeling a lot of fear around even being outside and drinking medicine during
Right.
COVID. And then I ended up organizing retreats with the Yawanawa and the Huni Queen in Peru, and my dad came on the retreat just to support me, and he ended up having a profound healing experience for himself, and that was just such a game changer for our relationship.
Oh, I mean that story right there, just that alone that's an incredible story. But I love that sentence. My dad drove me to my first ayahuasca ceremony. I mean, that says so much right there of your relationship. And I know that's certainly something that most people don't have that level of support around their psychedelic use with their parents. So especially given everything you had gone through, that's really a testimony to how much he believed in you and your path, even if he was not in or scared of it or not in agreement with it. So that's really
Exactly.
beautiful. Yeah.
And just to share, something I've actually never shared publicly about that story, when he came to Peru the first night of
Mhm.
ayahuasca, he relived my suicide attempt in ceremony.
Ooh.
And he said that was the hardest moment of himself as a father to go through that and see his daughter in that way. And he relived all the trauma that we experienced. And he held me in the ayahuasca ceremony and like a baby and cried and said, "I'm sorry." And I said, "I'm sorry." And it was just a powerful moment for our relationship to really to close the door and to have that resolve. I think is just all that we want, with ruptures and relationships, is just to feel that resolution. And I feel complete, and I feel like that moment really opened a door of a new relationship for us, where I feel so much more trust for him. I feel resolved in what we experienced. And it was just incredible I've never seen my dad cry. And he's a cancer doctor at Stanford who's like very much in that Western world. And just to see him come to these plants with just such reverence and respect and have the courage to drink ayahuasca is just profound. So I'm really, really grateful for that experience that we had together.
Thank you so much for sharing. You said that you've never shared that publicly before, and that there's, I've seen so many people have those healing moments energetically, just like you described. I mean, he didn't get up and hold you in the ceremony. He did it energetically, but then you were there. And that's what most people don't get to have. They can have the energetic healing with a parent in a psychedelic ceremony, but then he walked over to you afterwards, I'm assuming, and shared at some point about this, and you were able to do it in person. That's incredibly valuable and very rare, Danielle. I think you know how rare that is.
It makes me feel emotional sharing it, honestly.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing that with us. Well, your soul obviously chose the right parents this lifetime, even though they were like, medical model, let's get you on some psychiatric drugs, but that was your journey. That's where you were supposed to be. So they performed their role of sending you down that particular rabbit hole so that you could come up into this more multidimensional world on the other side. So, as a result of your experience, you have obviously developed a very different perspective around addiction than we typically see in, say, a 12-step program. So, you don't think it's a disease, and you believe that loving your addiction is the path to transforming it and releasing shame. And as you've already said, you see it as a gift, a lesson path. So, tell us how you got to that understanding.
Yeah. I feel that the psychedelics have helped me understand addiction in a new way. And I believe that so much of the current paradigm of addiction treatment views addiction as something that's wrong with a person, something that we have to apologize for. And I feel so differently. I feel like the medicines have taught me that the past 15 years of drug addiction were it was my spiritual training program. And I needed to go through that to ascend my soul. And I think, from a soul level, I think it's not fun for a soul to have an easy life. The soul wants difficulty to overcome it, so to evolve its consciousness. And I feel like I went through all of that, not only to heal my own lineage and my soul, but to help millions of people around the world heal. And I could sit here and say, I'm a victim to addiction. It happened to me. It was horrible. It was bad. I'm so sorry for the addiction. And, I'm always going to be an addict for the rest of my life. And I don't see how there's empowerment in that. And I think, the first step is to realize, like, we're so powerful. We're more powerful than any drug or any substance. And the addiction was the best thing that ever happened to me. I wouldn't be here on this conversation with you today. I wouldn't be doing this work that I'm doing now had I not go through addiction. So it really brought me to my knees and to become the healthiest version of myself and the deepest version of myself. Like, people that go through addiction see, they go through extreme darkness and vulnerability, and really the depths of the darkest places we can probably go as humans, which means that we can come into the greatest light and the growth and the ascension. And I think, that we want to treat our addiction with the same reverence and respect as we do with the healing. It's all a part of the healing. It's on the spectrum of healing. And so that's so much of what I teach is, instead of, people come to our recovery program and they say, I wish I hadn't gone through that, or I spent, 20 years addicted to drugs and I lost those 20 years. And it's like, what if we reframe that and view it as the most important 20 years of our life? And what if we thank our addiction for how much it brought to our life? And what if we really thank the drugs and the alcohol? Because I probably would have died, honestly, had it not been for my addiction. Addiction saved my life until it didn't.
Right.
It was my attempt to try to solve a problem and my attempt to try to feel normal and to self-soothe. And if the addiction didn't work, people wouldn't get addicted. It's effective in its role of soothing and providing its safety. I remember the first time I discovered Oxycontin, it was like, oh, I can live now because I feel safe and I feel comfort and I feel belonging. And so it plays a powerful role. So I want to respect it for that and not demonize it.
Well, I think that's a game changer, and that is so you run addiction recovery programs, right? So tell us
Yeah.
about those.
Yeah, so throughout the beginning of my recovery process, I started going to integration circles, and I felt like I was the only one at the integration circle talking about addiction. And I didn't want to go to 12-step programs because 12-step, I have respect for 12-step. However, 12 steps philosophy is total abstinence from all drugs and alcohol and the disease of addiction. And I just didn't resonate with that anymore. And so I felt like there was a need to create a new group for people that are using psychedelics to wean off of either harmful drugs or substances or behaviors, and allow a space for people to integrate psychedelics into their recovery. And the group just started as a small group in San Francisco with 20 people. And now we've been doing the group for 6 years. We have 9 groups a month. One of them's in person, 8 of them are online. It's a harm reduction peer support group. We have agreements in the group. One of the agreements is we view addiction as a teacher, a guide, and a gift. We've had over 5,000 people come through our program, from people from all around the world, all these different countries. I've trained 30 people to be able to facilitate these groups as peer support specialists. And it's been amazing and really empowering. And I think the group itself has started to normalize psychedelics and addiction recovery. And we've had people come to the group and say that this group saved their life. And it's one of the most powerful spaces for them because it's the only place that they feel safe, that they can talk about their addiction and recovery. It's also, our mission is to shift the paradigm and the philosophy around addiction, to really normalize it and to make it be something that people accept and love about themselves. So a lot of what I teach is integrated into that program because I think that's important for healing addiction for people that are, integrating psychedelics into their recovery. It's also an integration space. It's a space for people that are in active addiction to learn from other people that are using psychedelics for their recovery. And I'm really grateful for this peer support group and for people that are, have the courage to be able to reclaim the power to heal themselves through psychedelics.
I mean, that alone, Danielle, is amazing, beautiful work that you could stay with for a lifetime and be proud of and say, this is what I accomplished. But then you've gone to another step with creating this amazing microdosing facilitator training program that you and Adam have put together. And so let's talk about that for a little bit, because I was just so impressed with the depth and breadth of the program. I'm curious, where did the idea for this program come from? Because here you are, you're working addiction, you've recovery, you've got a work path, right? And so, why all of a sudden, where did the idea for the microdosing facilitator training come from?
And thank you so much for being a part of the program. Thank you for your trust. We really love having you in the program. And so Adam and I have been collaborating for the past 5 years, creating microdosing courses. We created one of the first microdosing courses during COVID. We had over 1,500 people come through that course. We've had thousands of people come through our microdosing courses, and they've all been in collaboration with Dr. Jim Fadiman. and other practitioners in the space. And many in these courses were just to teach people how to use microdosing on their own. And many of the people that have come through these courses were practitioners and guides and therapists and clinicians that have expressed an interest in learning how they can apply this information for their clients. And so after doing these two courses together, we decided to take it to this next step and to create a training program specifically to train individuals how to guide their clients safely and effectively. And Adam and I have also been working individually as microdosing coaches and practitioners for the past 5 years, guiding hundreds of people on our own. So a lot of the inspiration has come through of seeing the success with our clients and recognizing that we want to make a greater impact by teaching practitioners what we've learned from being able to guide people. And then that, this idea just opened up to, well, why don't we get all of our friends involved in the space that are experts? And we realized that to really train practitioners how to guide people, we have to cover so many different areas of the microdosing experience. And so people have asked, well, why do you need 22 teachers? And it's like, I could teach about the science, but it should come from the scientist. It should come from the scientist doing that. And there's just so many areas of the microdosing experience that needed to be touched upon to really create informed and confident practitioners in the space that are, well educated to be able to effectively guide a whole range of populations of people.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about in terms of the breadth of the program. I mean, we learned about neuroscience, neuroplasticity, using microdosing for addiction recovery. We learned about contraindications. We learned about the various protocols, including we got to learn about the Fadiman protocol from Jim Fadiman himself, which was quite the gift. We learned about current cutting edge research in the field, as well as heart-centered coaching skills so that we could work with clients where they are. And you also created this beautiful community of people who are now ready to take this knowledge out into the world. So everybody has their own mycelium network within that cohort to help everyone as they launch what they've learned out into the world. And so I learned so much. And as a result, I'm now offering microdosing facilitation as part of my integration coaching practice. And that's not, I didn't really have an intention to do that. I really just had the intention to just be up to date and to understand sort of what the latest science was, what the latest research was, what was happening in the world. And so, as I said, it was not something I'd considered before. So thank you for the inspiration. I learned about microdosing in 2015 from Jim Fadiman. I was at a group that he was a part of, and he was teaching about microdosing. And so he's considered the godfather of microdosing. He made up the Fadiman protocol. And if you Google microdosing protocol, there are a number of protocols. There's the Stamos protocol, the Fadiman protocol. There's a number of others. And I think the most important thing actually for anybody is to find the path and the pace that works best for your system. But it's always good to start with somebody's protocol. He learned about it from Albert Hofmann, the chemist who first synthesized LSD. And so that's one of the reasons why I've been microdosing myself since 2015. And that's one of the reasons why I wasn't going to take this training, because I had my own microdosing protocol dialed in. As I said, my guides had different plans for me, and I'm so glad that I listened to them. You say on the website, microdosing is a skill, not a pill, which I definitely agree with. What is it that makes this training separate from, okay, for myself, I've been microdosing since 2015. I have my protocols, I have how I do it. But why is this an important training? What's the skill that's associated with this?
I love that. And I love that you first learned about microdosing with Jim. And I'm so curious to hear how your microdosing experience has personally been for you. And in terms of the microdosing as a skill, I think, we're shifting out of the philosophy of just take a little bit and that's it. And, there's so many aspects to how we can improve our microdosing experiences and facilitate microdosing as a tool for growth and transformation. And I think the potential that microdosing has even greater potential when we use it in combination with facilitation and coaching techniques. As a whole, I think the the training program is an integration program, because that's really what microdosing facilitation is. It's a look back medicine, right? So we take the dose and then we look back at our experience and what it's been, and we can use microdosing as a tool to really help us reach our goals. We talk about microdosing as an electric bike, and there's so many aspects to the microdosing experience, and even down to the psilocybin mushrooms themselves. And so that's why we have Hyphae Labs that teaches on our training program. They've been doing psilocybin potency testing for years, and they're really finding, the varieties in different strains of mushrooms, and how that's sort of our whole paradigm of what we've known about microdosing is shifting, because it's getting a lot more nuanced in terms of certain strains being more effective for microdosing than macrodosing. And Manesh Gurn talks about neuroplasticity, and neuroplasticity in and of itself is inherently neutral. We have, the ability to actually positively influence our brains. We are the ones that create positive neural pathways. It's the microdosing in and of itself is not going to do that for us. It's going to open up these neural pathways, but we have to be the one to walk through it and to create these new habits, create these new behaviors, these new thought patterns about ourselves. And also, there's so many different medication contraindications and pitfalls, areas that we might have to potentially screen people that might be harmed by the process of microdosing. There's populations of people that could really benefit from this, that might be more scared to approach this based on the rudimentary information that we know about microdosing. And so really viewing it and expanding it outside of just taking a little bit, to really taking it with such an informed consent and process around it, I think, really informs us that it is a skill. And the more that we understand of how to use it safely and effectively and ethically, can improve our overall outcomes of the microdosing experience, and also shift the psychedelic field as a whole, and shift the stigma around it, and really steward this next wave of microdosing, the microdosing movement, with intentionality, with care, with professionalism, and with the standardization of these processes.
There you go. That's perfect. That's beautiful. I know that Jim Fadiman has written, along with one of my friends, Jordan Gruber, they have written probably the ultimate book on microdosing. It's available on Amazon or I'm sure other places, to pre-order it, but it's coming out in February. And Jim was able to tell us a little bit about some of what was going to be in that book in the training sessions that he was a part of. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. And of course, I want to promote Jim Fadiman in any way I can, because he is a psychedelic treasure, one of the absolutely original psychedelic thought leaders, and he's still present with us, which is a rarity. And the work that he has done in the world is just beautiful. I mean, he was doing work with psychedelics when they were legal, and he has continued his interest and his study throughout all of the dark period when there was no studies and everything was deep, dark underground. So I want to honor him, and I know that you do as one of your special mentors. So that's a shout out to Jim. Will you walk us through what's it like to create a program like this? I know that there was so much hardship and pitfalls that you had to navigate. So can you speak a little bit about that? This is not, oh, okay, great. We'll just invite all our friends and they'll all come over, and, we'll charge money, and we'll teach a skill set, and, that'll be the end of it. Tell us what really went into creating the program.
Thank you for recognizing that and honoring that, and also honoring Jim. I adore Jim. He's an incredible human being. I feel like he's such a mentor, and, not only around microdosing, but just as a humble human.
Yeah, beautiful. Exactly.
He's
do you know the name of the book? Because as I'm shouting out to go pre-order it somewhere, do you know what it's called? It's definitely, if you Google Jim Fadiman and microdosing, it'll come up. But do you know the actual name?
Yes, Microdosing for Health, Healing, and Enhanced Endurance.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I think their website is now livemicrodosingbook.com.
It is, yes.
Yes.
Right, so all of that will be in the show notes as well. But go ahead. I've just asked you about what it really takes to create a program like this, the blood, sweat, and tears behind it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, gym is a part of that for me. Like I make it a point. I've really felt like it's important that we have mentors and elders in this space. And I can say that he's the only mentor that I really feel connected to in this space. I visit him every month. I make it a point to really have that ongoing relationship with him. He's just such a powerful guide and always gives his feedback on things and guidance. And I just really appreciate him so much for all that he brings into my life and into the work that we do. And in terms of the program, it's been I feel like the spirit world has been guiding the entire process. And it's almost like I've done this before in previous lifetimes. And so it's just the organization of it has come quite easy for me. I feel like it's been sort of building upon all the skills that I've acquired organizing events and courses in the psychedelic field, but just turn it up a notch, 10x. And and so, yeah, it's just been a lot of coordination with all these different speakers and practitioners and paying people well, honestly, for their work. That's really important to me is, something that I think is actually lacking a bit in the psychedelic space. So, yeah, just organizing the information and really thinking about all these different areas of what will practitioners need to learn to be able to properly guide people. We've really prioritized diversity in our program. Over 50% of our staff is BIPOC. We prioritize all these different walks of life, not just we have a lot of clinicians in the program, but people that aren't clinicians as well, and really amplifying different voices within the microdosing space and experts, and thinking about all the different populations of people that we want to help and also the different providers that we want to help. And that really came into the program in terms of that. And then we have 4 different aspects of this program that are really important to me. Definitely the live sessions are important where people can feel that live element and be able to talk to the different teachers and ask them questions, and then having a practicum where people get to practice the skills within their groups and having breakout sessions throughout the program and just making it really dimensional in what we're offering the program, but also putting so much time and intention into it. Like I designed every integration form. Every time we sent a newsletter, it had a new design on it. We went over and beyond with all the design of all of the different materials. I just think I poured my heart into it. And now I actually want to train people how to create their own programs. I'm currently working with my aunt who's a therapist, and she's been teaching people about suicide prevention. She works with teenagers and she wants to develop everything she knows for the past 30 years into a training program. And I feel equipped now to be able to train people how to create programs. And I feel excited about that. And there's just so much that's gone into it of just every little detail and nuance is something that you really have to pay attention to when you're creating a program, and being open for feedback. Every time we sent out an integration form, I said, how can we improve? Give us feedback. And that's been something that I think is really important. It's just bringing that humility to realizing this was our first time doing it. It's not going to be perfect, but how can we continue to improve and listen to all of our clients that are in the program? We always made ourselves accessible for every student and really putting that heart into it. And I think, the feedback we've gotten is that people can feel the heart and they feel the intention, they feel the care that has been put into it. And I feel really proud of what we created, and I'm really grateful for all the positive feedback that we've received around the program. And we just had a call with people that 4 new graduates from the program, and they all said, "I feel confident to now guide people safely and effectively." And I feel like that's the goal. I want to create a world of practitioners that feel confident to be able to work with these medicines. And hearing you say that, Carla, just fills my body with so much light and gratitude for what we created.
Well, it's obviously a soul project, but I know it wasn't all ease and flow. You got shadow banned from Instagram. I want to talk about what is that and what happens and how did you get back? And then also just to call out for any of you who are following anybody who talks about psychedelics or medicines on Instagram, you're noticing that people are not spelling the word psychedelic anymore because the bots are searching. So tell us about just that experience of how hard it is to put education and harm reduction material out into the world when it's associated with psychedelics.
Absolutely. Literally, this past few weeks, past month has been getting punched in the face over and over again. We lost our Instagram account. We're not able to get it back yet. And, it was just removed. And I'm grateful we didn't have thousands and thousands. We had a couple thousand followers, but, it could have been a lot worse. The Psychedelic Society of San Francisco, we had our account taken down at 50,000 followers. We were able to get it back, but there used to be more of a process in place for getting your account back. Now they've removed that entirely.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, you used to be able to have people submit on your behalf and say, what happened to this page? Where is it? And now you can't even do that. There's just no one to talk to. We've had friends at Double Blind Magazine and all these other organizations try to advocate on our behalf. But apparently, because we're teaching people about facilitation and microdosing, it's even worse. We've had our Stripe account taken down, our payment processor. We can't work with Stripe. We've had yesterday Affirm, which is our ability to take payment plans. We got canceled there. That's taken down. So it's just been nonstop of just roadblocks for us as a wellness psychedelic company. And there's a lot of psychedelic organizations in the space that are also getting their payment processors taken down. And just, it's an ongoing process of like spiritual kung fu and also trusting in the divine and really just humbling ourselves. So now we're really looking towards people and organizations to help us get the word out there. So this helps us so much, other organizations that are willing to be affiliates with us to help us spread the word, because we're definitely getting, blocked by these big media companies, like Facebook shadow bans. Anytime you say the word psychedelic or even write the word psychedelic, it'll get suppressed. You can get your account taken down. So we have to get creative and our ways of putting this information out there.
And that's actually, I hate email. I'm really bad at email at this point, but it's really the only way, that thing that doesn't get taken away. And so if you do want to support, well, me or some like Danielle in her work, so whether it's addiction recovery or this microdosing facilitator training or anything else that she's doing, you have to give up your email because of this, because at any point you're like, oh no, I'll just follow on Instagram. And it's like, but then the Instagram account is gone, or it's suppressed, or you have no idea what's happening. And so it's really the only way that we have control. So that's a call out for myself. I would of course appreciate. And by the way, if you give me your email, you get my psychedelic safety guide, including what to do when things go wrong. And y'all, things go wrong. So it's, it's worth the trade. And I know that Danielle feels the same way, that if she has you on her email list, she can reach you and you can learn about this, all the amazing work that she does in the world. So your next training cohort, the microdosing facilitator training, starts in January. What do you want anyone considering signing up to know?
Well, first of all, I really want to read your safety guide. That sounds amazing and really interesting. And we've actually
just if you give me your email, you'll get it.
I will give you my email happily.
Psychedelicdivas.com.
I love that. What a beautiful offering. That's so important. So we actually extended it, and we're going to begin mid-February.
Okay.
Because of the challenges we've been navigating,
Right.
we're giving a little bit more time and space for our promotional period. I want anyone considering signing up to know that I think that they're powerful, and not in like a dominating sense, but in like, yeah, you're a powerful being that has the capacity to really make a difference. And I imagine people that are already listening to your podcast and in your community are doing powerful work already. And this is just taking it up a notch and helping more populations of people through this microdosing training program. And we want to create a web where no one falls through the cracks, and that we have practitioners of all different kinds that can support people with microdosing. And we would love to welcome anyone into our program that's feeling the call to support their clients in a deeper way and to really become an expert in the field of microdosing. That's what our training program pretty much guarantees, because it's the most comprehensive program that exists on microdosing in the world. And there's so much that you can do with this program. You can, not only work one-on-one with people, but with groups and couples, and facilitate retreats or speak on workshops or create courses or speak at conferences. It's really infinite what we can do with this training and with this expertise. And a lot of people say, where do you find the most accurate information about microdosing? And it's here.
Yeah.
It's here with this program. And I think it's really comprehensive in terms of, it's not just about microdosing education, but we really provide some unique coaching and facilitation techniques. And by taking this program, it standardizes and professionalizes this field. And there's very few practitioners that exist that specialize in microdosing. Now there's 55 of them, but we want to create this new wave of a career in microdosing. So anyone that's considering taking this program, that's even on the fence about it, I'd love to speak with you about it if you're considering it, and would love to welcome you into our incredible community and network of practitioners.
And I actually would be happy to share about my own experience. So you can always reach out to me via my coaching website, which is carladetchen.com. And I'd be happy to talk with anybody about my own thoughts and my own experience with the program. So as part of the program, you're part of your own little mini cohort as part of the program. And then that mini cohort has to create a final presentation. And in our final presentation, one of the things that I said is that the world isn't ready for macrodosing. It's too big, it's too scary, it's too much for most people. But microdosing is a gentler, for me, it's a more aligned with the divine feminine. It's softer, it's more intuitive, you're in control. It's like, as you just said, as you were describing in your addiction recovery process, I was like, I just took a little bite. There was an intuitive process that was guiding you. This isn't the way that you train the microdosing facilitators. It's not someone saying, here, take this. This is the amount. Take it this often. You're working, with the clients to find that intuitive path for themselves, which is, to me, so divine feminine oriented. And microdosing feels very divine feminine oriented because it's softer, slower, gentler. It's more nurturing. It doesn't body slam you like a macro journey can sometimes do. And so for me, it's one of the reasons why I've been doing microdosing for so long, is that it became an intuitive part of how I wanted to flow into the world and choosing which days and how much. And so I learned so much in my own just intuitive process with it. And I think that's having someone who can guide you in that and teach you how to assess. As you said, it's a look back medicine. It's like, well, okay, I took it once or twice or three times this week. Now let's look back on your week. What shifted? And it might be something really subtle, like, well, I didn't snap at my husband as much as I talked to my parents and I didn't get triggered, or like little tiny things. My boss dumped a bunch of work on me, but I was 5% less stressed. It's like those are the shifts. They can sometimes be small and incremental, but when you're working with someone to look back, you're much more likely to say, oh, wait a minute, that did make a difference. That is changing my perspective, and it has value. So anyway, that's to me is the value of having a microdosing facilitator to work with, is that well, just the same with any coaching relationship. You've got a partner in the experience and someone who's teaching. I want to be very, very clear that the entire training is education and harm reduction focused. You do not provide medicine. There is no way to purchase or sell or get access to medicine in any way. So, because that's one of the things that's creating the shadow bans. I can understand the importance of the bots searching for words and trying to pull down some of those sites, because what they're selling actually isn't even any sort of real thing at all. But the harm reduction, the education programs are getting caught up in that. And so I just want to clarify that you are 100% educational and harm reduction focused.
Exactly. I love what you said. You're a beautiful guide and advocate for the microdosing path. You just spoke about it so eloquently. I just want to, yeah, reflect that.
Thank you. Well, for those of you who are interested in seeing Danielle's stunning addiction recovery video, which there'll be a link in the show notes. It's really worth watching. Or if you want to learn more about the microdosing facilitator training program, there are links in the show notes and on our website, psychedelicdivas.com. Danielle, where can people find out more about you?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me on the show and for what you're creating here with Psychedelic Divas. I love your mission, and I know that this has been a beautiful emergence and birthing process of the decades of experience that you have, and just so excited for you and what you're creating here and the fractal of impact that that's creating on the world. So, thank
Oh,
you
thank you.
for having me. My website is flowstatenow.com. You can find me there. And then I'm on Instagram, Connect with D. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. And you can also find my work with the Psychedelic Society SF.org and psychedelicrecovery.org.
Beautiful. And all of those links will be in the show notes because we know that y'all are driving and walking and doing dishes and multitasking as you should, as you are listening to this. So we're going to make your life easy. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Danielle. It's really just been a joy to see your journey. I mean, you were so young and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed when I met you in 2018, and you have just grown with so much depth and beauty and resonance with your work. And I can absolutely say that the world of psychedelics is better with your contributions. So
Wow. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Carla. And just honored to be on this transformative path with you and to be, yeah, incredible colleagues and mentors and allies to each other. Thank you for all that you are and all that you've been and all that you will continue to be. And for anyone listening on this path, I'm just, yeah, honoring you for who you are. And, I think it takes a certain individual and life experience to come to these medicines and come to this work. And it takes a lot of courage and depth and humility to work with these medicines. So I just appreciate your audience for listening today. And I look forward to our continued expansion.
thank you. Beautiful. All right. And thank you all for listening, sending out so much as I talked to my parents and I didn't get triggered or, like little tiny things. My boss dumped a bunch of work on me, but I was, 5% less stressed. It's like, those are the shifts. They can sometimes be small and incremental, but when you're working with someone to look back, you're much more likely to say, "Oh, wait a minute, that did make a difference. That is changing my perspective, and it has value." So anyway, that's to me is the value of having a microdosing facilitator to work with is that well, just the same with any coaching relationship. You've got a partner in the experience and someone who's teaching. I want to be very, very clear that that the entire training is education and harm reduction focused. You do not provide medicine. Medicine is not, you are not, there is no way to purchase or sell or get access to medicine in any way. So, because that's one of the things that's creating the shadow bans. There's so many people who are selling. Well, when we talk about what's being sold on Instagram, so I can understand the importance of the bots searching for words and trying to pull down some of those sites because what they're selling actually isn't even any sort of real thing at all. But the harm reduction, the education programs are getting caught up in that, and so I just want to clarify that you are 100% educational and harm reduction focused.
Exactly. I love what you said. You're a beautiful guide and advocate for the microdosing path. You just spoke about it so eloquently. I just want to, yeah, reflect that.
Thank you. Well, for those of you who are interested in seeing Danielle's stunning addiction recovery video, which I really please go there, there'll be a link in the show notes. It's really worth watching. Or if you want to learn more about the microdosing facilitator training program, there are links in the show notes and on our website, psychedelicdivas.com. Danielle, where can people find out more about you?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me on the show and for what you're creating here with Psychedelic Divas. I love your mission, and I know that this has been a beautiful emergence and birthing process of the decades of experience that you have, and just so excited for you and what you're creating here and the fractal of impact that that's creating on the world. So, thank
Oh,
you
thank you.
for having me. And yeah, my website is flowstatenow.com. You can find me there. And then I'm on Instagram, Connect with D. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. And you can also find my work with the Psychedelic Society SF.org and psychedelicrecovery.org.
Beautiful. And all of those links will be in the show notes because we know that y'all are driving and walking and doing dishes and multitasking as you should as you are listening to this. So we're going to make your life easy. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Danielle. It's really just been a joy to see your journey. I mean, you were so young and bright eyed and bushy tailed when I met you in 2018, and I you have just grown so with so much depth and beauty and resonance with your work, and I can absolutely say that the world of psychedelics is better with your contributions. So
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Carla. And just honored to be on this transformative path with you and to be, yeah, incredible colleagues and mentors and allies to each other. Thank you for all that you are and all that you've been and all that you will continue to be. And for anyone listening on this path, I'm just, yeah, honoring you for who you are. And, I think it takes a certain individual and life experience to come to these medicines and come to this work. And it takes a lot of courage and depth and humility to work with these medicines. So I just appreciate your audience for listening today. And I look forward to our continued expansion.
thank you. Beautiful. All right. And thank you all for listening. Sending out so much love to all of you. And thank you so much for the support that you've been showing the show. It just means the world to me. And if you did enjoy this episode, please feel free to share it and leave us, if you have a moment, one of those fabulous 5-star reviews, because they make all the difference in the algorithms. And our world, as we know, is run by algorithms. So thank you all. All right. Bye-bye. Love to all of you. And thank you so much for the support that you've been showing the show. It just means the world to me. And if you did enjoy this episode, please feel free to share it and leave us, if you have a moment, one of those fabulous 5-star reviews, because they make all the difference in the algorithms. And our world, as we know, is run by algorithms. So thank you all. All right. Bye-bye.